All right, Chapter 2. Again, we don't talk too much about the objectives. You can read those. Electronic Expo, Comic-Con's always a good example of an event that didn't start off great, and now you see that event draws tons of people, and it's also a good place for movies to premiere with that crossover that we've had with comic book adaptations lately and the success that they've had. So very, very large events. So the corporations, again, depending on the type of corporation, you can kind of see those things here, but they're going to hold huge events. Centrally located, or maybe it's a getaway for their employees to go to certain cities or countries and really enjoy the fruits of their labor and throw a big shindig to discuss how well they're doing, as an example. So again, those are just kind of the definitions of stuff. I think you already know those definitions. So if you want to have any of these types of meetings, depending on what the corporations want to do. And it's an interesting thing, kind of a paradigm shift for event planning and events in general with the technology that's out there now. And we saw a lot of businesses really, really overspending in some of these meetings. Sometimes it's just, hey, we need a room that we can video conference in, or hey, we're going to do all of this over our computers. But there are still things out there that happen where we fly folks in for various things. Company gets bought out, we have to do training and things like that. So it really just, it's a situational type deal. Again, when you're doing events, you never know what the next phone call is going to be and what the business is looking for. So if you're big enough, you're going to have corporate planners. And you can see that percentage of their time is spent planning meetings. So I have a friend that's a corporate planner, and pretty much it. There are roughly, I believe, over 2,500 people in her organization, and she's responsible for getting them together 3 times a year. And so they know that she knows what they're looking for and what they want, and so she's tasked with handling all of it. And trust me when I tell you, it's a lot, and she earns her money. So, again, places that host the most meetings, I don't think that any of those numbers up there would surprise you. In various cities and locations. And so Orlando, which, if you're living in South Florida when you're taking this class, convention center is massive, and there's a lot of reasons people pick Orlando. And I know businesses from all over the United States and all over the world that love to do their meetings in Orlando, and very family friendly if you can afford to bring everybody else with you as well. Vegas is another, world into itself, but you can kind of see the places. I don't know that any of those would surprise you more so, but it's you always have to do it. San Diego, when I think of San Diego, I think of Comic-Con always as the big event. So again, who holds these meetings? Like we talked about, associations. So from an academic standpoint, we have conferences that take place in a lot of our organizations in hospitality that are in different places in the U.S. Some are across the world, depending on different types of journal articles that you may publish for academic research. You may go to a different city. You may go to a different country, depending on if you get accepted. But again, all these different things that happen, and like you said, 33% of an association's annual income, it's definitely possible. Could be less, could be more. Professional, medical, health, trade, SMERFs, you'll hear that SMERF term a lot. You'll see it in your book. The medical field and their types of associations, trade associations, professional, in addition to all the members being there, as I said before in Chapter 1, people that are there trying to sell the latest and greatest products and services that can help these organizations. So you can charge quite a bit for them to be there. Again, types of meetings. Typically, when we have a convention, some of the things that you see underneath those conventions are things that may happen as an aside at the same time during the conference. So maybe, there's a statewide organization in Florida, and it has board members. And so the statewide conference is happening in Orlando for 3 days. And And the second day of the 3 days, there's some breakout, education sessions for the members to hear different people talk. The board may meet at that same time. A certain committee may meet at that same time during the larger thing. And in some cases, the regional conference may just be that, and it may not be everybody. The board may just meet separately than that. Sometimes they come a day early, sometimes they meet in a totally separate location. So it just depends on how it's structured by the association. Marketing, big surprise there that that it's critical. When we have these events, the goal is to, get turnout, have people show up for them. And it's very hard to do. I was part of an organization that used to have events all over the United States. And what we found was, as you can imagine, the further West Coast you went, turnout from West Coast members was great and East Coast members was terrible, because of the time difference and travel that was involved, and vice versa was also true. So they went from having all these different cities to basically picking a couple centralized locations in the United States, and they found over time that was a better way for them to do it, to say, okay, maybe still we're not going to get as many people, but we have a much better chance of attracting the highest number of attendees that we can by placing it in this certain location. So then it was marketing it, and when you know what's going to happen. So for example, in the hospitality industry, it may be a product of seasonality, and they may just say the best time that we think we can market this convention is January or June. And that's really going to depend, because more than anything, that's what you're going to want to have is turnout. So maybe for the first time you do it, you plan, and hopefully it goes right, and sometimes it doesn't. Responsible for organizing the plan, and like we said, board of directors and committee is going to do the venue in the host city. So host city, I told you a little bit about geographically, or maybe there's something happening in that city that is important for the business to be there, or the organization to be there, and then selecting the venue. And that's where, with event planning, tons and tons and tons of factors go into the venue. Requirements and number of guests that are attending and things like that. I mean, Las Vegas is great for conventions for a lot of different reasons, but obviously venue selection, because those hotels are also big, that's a good idea. My friend that does the things, as I told you before, negotiating contracts, they have the voice to speak for the board and negotiate what is needed. So government meetings, those are probably happening once a week at some level. So, some are quarterly, some are annually, some are monthly. It just depends on the organization's needs and what they're trying to do. And you can see these different things that happen. Washington, D.C. and the amount of governmental agencies that meet, like that is bread and butter for the District of Columbia. And I have a friend who's an event planner there, and probably 95% of their business is government agencies. Again, training, interdepartmental, interagency, all these things, legislative hearings and retreats, the kind of things you would think of when it comes to why government organizations would hold meetings. Makes sense. And you can see that it has an overlap with why it's going on. If it's mandatory that you have to be there, then you have to be there, and you don't really have to have a lot of advance notice. You have a captive audience. And you can see the other one would be a little bit different. So that also goes into planning as well. Political organizations. So during election years, what are we going to have? We're going to have, you're going to have caucuses, you're going to have rallies, you're going to have debates, you're going to have all kinds of different things like that happen. And, the logistics of putting on an event for, I'll use that as an example, for a debate for a political party. Think about all the moving pieces that go into making that happen. Security, access, all these different things. Labor unions, same thing. And even though some states don't have unions, the ones that do, it's a big deal. Okay. So people that help that organize this stuff, like we said, trade shows, expositions, open to the public. So if you have a mix, and it's very possible that you have a mix, but what is the purpose of having this show. What is the goal? Why are we having it? What do we want to have come out of it? And if it's just for business, then it's probably going to be a lot of stuff that's done where it's you only sell to businesses, you don't sell to the public, things like that. Again, exhibition management companies, it's a lot of work. And some of these things, we mentioned Chicago. So to give you an idea that one of Chicago's meeting things at the McCormick Center is 1 million square feet of meeting space. And that's massive. To try to put that all together is crazy. So again, you can get help. So it's what happens, and if it's your specialty and that's what you do and that's what you're really good at, then people come to you and they know you're the person to come to hold these different types of events. And, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Don't reinvent the wheel. If it's not something that you specialize in, it's like, this is what we need. I know you're really good at it. Can you help us? Budget is always going to be an issue, and I'll go ahead and say this now. Any event that you do, budgets are going to be an issue. It's a wedding, quinceanera, birthday party, trade show, stockholders meeting. There's always going to be budgetary constraints, and they're always going to want to do more for less. That shortening of the meetings, as we said before, if it was 3 days and one of those days was you're just lounging by the pool and partying, maybe now it's a day and a half. And the frequency of the meetings, like we said, what is the value of me taking time out of my schedule, shutting down my business or not being at my business to go to Las Vegas for 3 days for a show or a meeting? The interactivity of meeting sessions, I worked with athletics, and one of the things that we learned how to do, and many of you when I say this are going to say we've used it before, Kahoot. We would look at changes to the laws, not just in our conference, but to the athletic organization as a whole. We would take straw polls with our phones and get a feel for it, because at the end of the convention, we would vote. And by the time we got to that, the organization kind of knew how everything was going based on these straw polls that were done through our phones during the course of the 4 days that the event went on. And that was great for them. And it was something that, as many years as I did it, I never would have thought of it. And they knew going into it, this vote's going to take 2 seconds because 95% of the people do not want it to happen. So it gave them a really good view of what was happening before they had to go through the actual legal process, their legal process of voting on it. I talked about the virtual conferences. I talked about outsourcing, return on investment. And again, the more that companies restrict their spending, which is what we're seeing system-wide in just about every company you can think of, the more appeal we're going to have for the anti-meeting. And what is another way we can do this where we don't fly 700 people to a city? Okay, because how much money could we save if we put them all in a room at a hotel 5 minutes from the office or in the office and had a virtual meeting and covered the same stuff we still need to cover? So it's a constant shift, and you still have many businesses and organizations that still fly people all over the place and want to do it and spend a lot of time and a lot of money, and they still feel that that's a valuable use of their time and resources and funds, is to have everyone together in the same room. And any of you that are listening to this, that are working, that are in a position or have had stuff like this, there's something to be said for having everyone in the same room getting the message, as opposed to the interference that can happen with you physically not being there. Whether you think that's silly or not, still there's something to be said for that. So it's constantly changing, and I can't stress enough again, budget.